This is This Week in Perspective with me, Adam Simbeye. The African Union, the successor of the Organization of African Unity, marked 54 years last week, Thursday, since it was founded with celebrations in all the 54 member states of the organization on the 25th of this month, as I said, which is normally referred to as Africa Day. What are the achievements, successes, or indeed the failures of this organization, and what is it, or what is its future beyond the 54 years? To discuss this and probably answer some of these questions with me today, on my right is Dr. Azavel Rwaitama. He's a part-time visiting lecturer at Josiah Kibira Makumira University College, as well as Cardinal Rugambwa University College in Bukoba, formerly University of Dar es Salaam. Next is Professor Mohabe Nyirabu, Department of Public Administration, University of Dar es Salaam. On my left, Professor Mwesiga Baregu, formerly University of Dar es Salaam, same department like Professor Mohabe, but now with St. Augustine University.
Used to be.
Used to be, yes, in the past. Last but not least, Ambassador Dr. Msuya Mangachi. This ambassador was permanent representative of the OAU of Tanzania, now part-time lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam, Department of Political Science and Public Administration. Gentlemen, welcome. Viewers, as usual, I will not stop apologizing for not gender balancing my panel, but I do have some problems which I can apologize for myself, but to you, that's the situation. Next time we'll try and get a gender balance on our program. So, gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let us do justice to the Africa Day. It's an important organization. Let's see, what has it done since it was established? That is the OAU, the predecessor, and now the AU, which was established in 1999. Professor Mohabe, I would rather start with you. Where is the OAU coming from? Where is it today, and what is its future beyond the 54 years? Please, can you start the ball rolling?
Let me try to start the ball rolling. Well, to begin with, I think 54 years is a good year to celebrate because you have survived so many problems. And so in a way, Africa should be celebrating that the institution that was created has survived many challenges and is still there. But also, the present provides time to reflect on the past. What has been done and what could have been done. So that will provide the basis for trying to chart out a plan to see where the future can go. Africa, as we all know, has a lot of challenges, quite a lot of challenges. And I think part of the problem is that the institution that is created for trying to address this challenge has not been empowered. That's my view.
The AU has not been empowered?
Has not been empowered sufficiently to be able to address some of the challenges, whether politics, economics, peace, conflict, and so forth and so on. Yeah. So it is time to take stock and look forward to address these challenges.
Okay. Professor Baregu?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad to be here. This is Africa Day. But I'm reminded, I think, originally it was supposed to be African Liberation Day. Mm-hmm. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the liberation part of the name, because if you look at the African Union now and the journey that we have made from the OAU to the AU today, yeah. And Professor Nyirabu has just said that at least we have survived the 54 years. I have a feeling that, yes, we have survived, but on life support.
But not in the ICU.
It is in the ICU. Obviously, on life support, you would have to be in the ICU. The reason I'm saying this, two things, just very quickly. One is that we did manage to acquire a new headquarters in Addis Ababa. Okay. But this was like a turnkey project, basically by the Chinese, a gift from the Chinese, I believe, maybe the ambassador here may have different information.
Yes.
But for me, it's that we failed to put some money together from 54 countries to put and even to signify the 54 years. You put your money. I think it's for me it was a very humiliating thing that you are maturing even when you are getting married at home. I mean, you're asked to build your home so that you can help your wife.
But even today,
children.
Professor, some of our boys get married, they're supposed to be independent, but they still are dependent on the parents.
That is the dependency syndrome.
Yeah, I tell you. And then at the same time,
Yeah.
if the Africans cannot, the African member states, the 54,
Yes.
The majority of them cannot even pay the yearly subscription. I mean, it would be unthinkable to expect that all these will contribute towards building a structure.
That is what decides whether you have survived like on your own dynamically or you have survived on life support. But the other thing,
Yes.
and which is even more important, is the budget, the operating budget of
Yes.
the African Union. My understanding of the data I have is that about 90% of the annual budget is dependent on donors.
Which budget now? Maybe the peacekeeping one. Not the administrative budget.
Well, I don't. I mean, the data.
Okay.
I have.
Let's see.
I think
I'll
the
give you the
ambassador can tell us
Yes,
exactly
I'll give the opportunity
how
to
much
clarify
dependence-
some of these. But
how much dependence is there.
But I think in general, the OAU is dependent on foreign, on
it is
African Union.
dependent on foreign money.
All right.
They may have some breakdowns in which they contribute, but the overall picture, there's quite a lot of dependence.
Okay, let's
Okay.
leave the
Okay.
90%.
We'll
as a
give you
figure.
we'll give you the permanent representative formally.
He will-
He'll clarify
He's
that.
my former student, so
I wouldn't
what,
It's a bit of respect, isn't it?
no, that doesn't mean that he shouldn't make his own opinion. Of course, my students always do that.
He's saying he's not intimidated.
No, of course they can't.
Okay,
do it.
Professor. Okay.
So what I wanted to say is that that kind of dependence, which does not only inform the AU, by the way, the East African community as well, very dependent on outside support.
Does SADC do the same? Is SADC in the same situation?
I think so. It's a syndrome. I think it's a syndrome. Well, hardly any of these bodies are really self-reliant in the manner that Nyerere used to talk about.
Is this unique in Africa?
I think this would seem to be the case. I think the most dependent continent now, because otherwise it used to be Asia, Africa, Latin America. I think it would seem to me that we have done more badly than Asia. Asia is dynamically really building up its capacity. Latin America, I think, as well, is really coming up. Think about the BRICS. Brazil, at least, India, China,
South Africa.
South Africa is, and as you know, South Africa is the only one that somehow is picked up and becomes part of the BRICS.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the rest of us, I think, that's why I was saying, but that we should not drop the term liberation, because I think there is a lot.
So liberation in a different
In a different way, Africa should really
like
reflect
economic
upon-
liberation,
yes,
liberation
economic
rather than
liberation.
military.
And sometimes I'm not even sure about the socio-political situation. So it's a
Okay.
It's a mixed bag.
Later on, I will cite
So,
a report of the African Development Bank, which more or less says something. It kind of praises the African continent.
the Africa Rising thing.
Yes. Dr. Ambassador Mangachi.
Thank you very much. I'm also pleased to be involved in this program. And 54 years of African integration process, which has two perspectives. One was the OAU phase, and now the AU phase. And indeed, it is a convenient time to make an analysis of where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are going. And I would like to address a little on the vision of that integration process that the continent set itself in in 1963, they had intended actually to build an Africa which was free from colonialism, and hence most of the OAU achievements which you can talk about was about how it helped the liberation process, particularly in Southern Africa. And I'm proud of course, of the role which Tanzania played.
Yes.
Until we can say from that objective was achieved. Okay. And I think OAU deserves to be praised for having achieved the process of liberation of the continent. Okay. But there was another debate on how Africa should integrate. And there were two visions, but you know, the vision of President Kwame Nkrumah, that Africa should make one step move towards a total African integration, a total African union, with one government, with one foreign policy, with a military, and with one country. And that vision was not implemented because Africa was not ready. And we are proud again, former president of Tanzania, first president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, provided a formula which managed to galvanize the support of the other leaders of Africa, that we should move gradually towards this unity of Africa. And in the 1980s...
Will that lead us to our African unity?
In the 1980s, I think there was a major initiative to try to also have a vision of African economic integration through the holding of the Lagos Plan of Action Summit, a summit which was held in Lagos and came out with the Lagos Plan of Action, which I think was one of the boldest initiatives Africa has taken, because there was a very comprehensive analysis of the continent's economic problems and a number of suggestions on how to move forward out of those problems. And indeed, one of the things which was emphasized was that Africa should not depend too much on outside support for its development. Mm-hmm. There should be some kind of self-reliance, a focus on self-reliance to get out of our problems. Okay. But also, we should also emphasize on regional economic communities to encourage horizontal cooperation amongst the African countries.
Okay. Let me cut you on there very quickly. Have these two been successful in 54 years?
Well, in 54 years, there have been some successes. I was going to talk about the transformation of the OAU, actually, at a convenient time, from OAU to the African Union, because circumstances had changed. Globalization and liberalization forces were strong, and the outlook of countries and the challenges facing the continent had changed.
But fundamentally, do you see any difference between the OAU and the African Union?
Well, if you go in between the lines, you might see that the African Union was an effort first to try to address the new challenges, and institutional mechanisms were put in place to try to address the issues in a different way, because you couldn't be addressing liberation in 2000 and beyond. You could only be addressing the issues of peace and security, for example, which had become more important for the continent. And then mechanisms have been put in place to address that particular issue, and something is being done about it. And I think we have to be fair to those efforts.
All right, we have to be fair. But sorry for that. Professor Mohabe, you interjected by saying can you see the difference between the OAU and African Unity? How about you? Can you see the difference?
Fundamentally, there's not much a big difference.
Okay.
There's no big difference. If you look at the principles that governed the OAU, they were the ones which were transferred here.
Yeah.
Very minor differences, but basically the same principles are still intact. Sovereignty of the state and non-interference in the internal affairs of matters and all these type of things.
Right. We've heard from the three of you.
But I'll want to intervene on the differences.
Right away?
And then we cannot...
Right away, because I want to point out areas.
The other thing that I wanted to say in connection to what he said, why should we praise the OAU for liberating the African continent? That is their duty. They were expected to do that.
But it was not an inborn, inherent
And
duty
if you
of
go into
African
detail,
countries.
you'll be surprised that...
It could have failed.
If you'll be surprised that it was some countries that contributed, not the Organization
That's
of
why
African...
maybe my intervention.
All
might
right.
help.
It's your time now. Thank you. I'm sorry.
But I think the
gentlemen.
question was, we are marking Africa Liberation Day, or Africa Day, 54 years on.
Liberation Day.
Now, why are we counting 54? Because we are marking the transition from conferences, congresses, okay, which were more often, actually all of them largely, done in the outside the continent, okay, of people who conceived of the idea of Africans as a nation, Africa as a nation. You know, Germans, French, okay? I mean, Africa is a nation. I mean, the idea that, you know, Africans have been enslaved, Africans have been colonized, their humanity had been challenged, wherever they are, you know, whether they actually live on the continent or not. You know, if you are just happening to originate from the continent, your humanity is challenged. You are being a human being is put under question. Okay. So the idea is that we are celebrating the transition, the beginning of the journey from ideas about Africa being one, Africa forming a nation with one government, with one currency, with one army, whether federal, most likely federal, but still the idea of identifying oneself as the Germans do as a nation. Okay. Yes. Now, these people in Addis Ababa, the Organization of African Unity was a compromise because there were people like Nkrumah who had come from the sixth Pan-African Congress in Manchester. You know, thank God Manchester is in the news now, all for the wrong reasons.
And for the good reason, my team won the Europe. Okay.
Yeah, but the other reason which I'm talking about is the terrorism, is the result of capitalism, the result of imperialism. You know, making people marginalized and making them prone to doing things which are inhumane. So now, colonialism itself, the slave trade, gave rise to the Pan-African Congresses, to the idea of Africans as a nation. In Marcus Garvey, in Sylvester Williams, who started the African Association in 1898 or something, you know, in London, okay? You know, and Sylvester Williams, I mean, you know, someone who was from the so-called the Caribbean, but actually originated from the African continent. So in Addis Ababa, 54 years ago, there was a compromise. People like Nkrumah were saying, the elite who organized the anti-colonial struggles were organizing them within the boundaries of territories created in Berlin. I mean, they had no meaning. I mean, you know, you found some Maasais in Kenya, some Jaruos in Uganda and Tanganyika and so on. I mean, so, you know, Tanganyika itself had been carved out of nowhere, you know, I mean, because previously it had been Germany.
That is the...
And so what I'm saying...
That's positive legacy of colonialism.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that what we... And that's why in the diaspora especially, that's why people celebrate this as Africa Liberation Day. Because it is the beginning of a journey towards African unity, but, you know, which by which you mean the creation of the African nation. Because outside Pan-Africanism, outside of an African identity, you have already a tribal identity.
Okay.
So
Accepted.
That's why I'm saying...
Accepted. Where are we now?
Where we are now is that this compromise has stayed for 54 years. And that's why AU and the African organization AU are the same.
Yeah,
because these are the same.
By the way, he's not AU.
No.
When you said
I'm
AU, I mean,
it's my hand is showing.
okay. He was your representative. Okay.
Oh, I'm saying
He's the diplomat among us.
the compromise has stayed for 54 years.
Yes.
At the city declaration in 1999, in September, okay, actually reinvigorated the idea. You know, it resulted, of course, in this other compromise called the African Union. I mean, but that is not the idea. You know, the idea is but remember, the city said we should now go back to the Abuja Treaty, and okay, through this regionalization, move faster towards an African Economic Community, and then eventually a federation of some kind. So what I'm saying is that where we are now is we are beginning to have a generation which is impatient with this compromise, okay, which wants to move faster towards the creation of an African nation, okay? You know, of course, the African nation is a dream, goes back to the Pan-African Congresses, okay? But the African nation as a reality is not yet there, okay?
All right. Okay, not yet.
And in
there.
the future,
Yes.
it is for the young people
Yes.
to take up this dream, okay,
Yes.
and push this compromise a little bit further.
Okay. And this could be for the young people to take up this dream, because are they ready really?
Yeah,
The
this
kind
is
of
the-
youth
this
we
the
know.
point,
Yes, Professor.
I think there is a difference between analyzing a situation objectively and advocating a position. I think when I listen to you, I hear more advocacy than analysis. Now, the reason I'm saying this, among other things, by the way, I wanted to Nani to correct, not to correct you, just to add to the point you made about Nyerere
Yes.
and Nkrumah, because in 1997, I think when Nyerere went to the
Ghana.
40th anniversary in Ghana, he retracted. He actually apologized that Nkrumah had a better vision then
Than his.
than his. And he confessed that, and at that point he said that if we do not take African unity seriously, then Africa has no future. This is what Nyerere said. And he said this against the background of an African Union that is not, that's not really focused. I think that was still OAU, that had lost a sense of direction. And he said this with some anger and with some impatience, not really seeing succeeding generations inheriting this cause. And this is the point that you made. So he made that point clear. And when we think about the future, where we're likely to go, we can only get wherever we want to go, and which is, we still want a united, one government Africa? Or have we retreated from that goal? Because there is this pretense that slowly, gradually, we are going to build up towards that goal, which is an African united Africa. Are we still focused on that goal?
Because
let me give you a quick example.
Okay.
A quick example on a much smaller scale. The East African community is essentially embarked upon a political journey towards political federation. They'll even tell you this phase, common currency, common market, blah blah, all the so-called stages. This last weekend, the communique that came from the summit in Dar es Salaam was that we had retreated to a confederation, not a federation of East Africa, but the ministers were instructed to begin to make arrangements for a confederation.
All right.
So,
okay, that's a good piece of information.
I want to pick,
Balozi
to pick where he has left it in terms of what should be done to achieve this vision of African unity.
Yes.
And maybe talk about the efforts that were made in 2007 summit in Accra. The proposal was to create an African Union government, and unfortunately, leader Gaddafi was a proponent of this. And he wanted Africa to come together, and he was even ready to finance it. But a lot of countries seemed not to be ready for it, just like they were not ready in 1963. And I'm talking to professors here who know the theory of the realist theory versus any proposals to come to give away sovereignty, you know. The African countries are still with their sovereignty, territorial integrity, and sovereignty defense.
The illusion of sovereignty and the illusion of integrity.
Yes. So they still.
Thank you for clarifying
that. That's what we suffer from.
So
yes,
this is the disease. And we are saying that what we should focus on now is within the framework of the African Union. What can we do to try to take forward this objective of unity? And I think I should start there because this is a given factor. We have the AU. We are saying it is weak, but there are mechanisms which are there which are not working properly. But if they were operationalized, if they were implemented, maybe this idea of coordination, for example, if we could strengthen the AU to be the center of coordination of the actions of African countries towards achieving certain specific goals, maybe we could make progress.
Absolutely. But let me make a follow-up question before Professor Nyirabu comes in. He's anxious to come in.
I didn't come in.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I mean, would you explain to us whether today the attitude, the philosophy, the understanding, the more or less cohesion in terms of having a continental, Africa continental one government is still in the minds of the leadership today, even the leadership of tomorrow and the leadership of the future? It could be just words, just heads of state and government meet in Addis Ababa or wherever, they revive this issue, but deep inside, they still want to maintain territorial integrity, sovereignty, and without nearly surrendering their sovereignty. You think this will really happen? This is where we are now, isn't it?
It can happen gradually. You know, trying to ally, trying to ally the fears, the fears of those rulers who are clinging to sovereignty. Because it's not only an African problem. It's a European problem. That's why you have Brexit. And it could be a problem.
Not necessarily a nation problem.
And it could be a problem if you went to Asia and pushed it too far from ASEAN and so on. But what our other countries are doing is to increase the areas of cooperation, which do not impinge too much on sovereignty, because there is scope for cooperation.
Absolutely.
And that's why when we create these secretariats as coordinating centers, we should emancipate them. We should give them power. We should give them mandate to coordinate effectively the member countries. And since the member countries are taking resolutions from their annual meetings, and this left to each country to implement them. So they choose what to implement and not what to implement. But if there was a mechanism to ensure that the coordinating secretariats are given power to follow up in the countries.
That is precisely why I said there is no difference between the OAU and the African Union.
Okay, Professor, I was going to ask you to come in. Follow up on what Ambassador Msuya Mangachi says. Do you think there is really a very strong political will among African leaders to achieve this Africa continental government? Even much less than that, like regional integration. I mean, is there a political will?
Say, political will can be broadly defined as the commitment to implement what has been agreed.
Yes.
And from past experience, there are certain examples that you can draw and see whether African leaders have really the political will. look at the regional integration schemes that have been existing in Africa. ECOWAS, for example, since 1975. The performance internally leaves a lot to be desired. SADC, COMESA, East African Community. Even the East African Community close at home, where we tend to pride ourselves with the same history and stuff like that. We have not even implemented the customs union fully.
Having serious problems.
So that is an example, the regional integration schemes. And yet, we've been speaking about Nyerere. I think Nyerere was getting wiser when he was getting old, as far as African more realistic.
Can you elaborate on that? Because that's very interesting.
In the 1960s, Nyerere was for what? Step-by-step integration.
Yes.
And they had a big debate with Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes.
Very vicious debate as far as what should be done to African unity. And in Accra, in Cairo, there was also that continuous, harmonious debate between Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah. But as Professor Barego has noted, in 1997, Nyerere was looking at, I think he had looked at Africa now with a lot of thinking about what should have been done. And as he said, African unity can never depend on the regional integration schemes. And they had been part of the experiences of regional integration schemes in Africa. One of them collapsed in his hands.
Yes,
East African
1977.
African Community. His country withdrew from COMESA at a certain point in time. So this question of regional integration schemes is more or less like a political ploy. But
it wasn't this was Nyerere's standpoint that let us first, I'll come to you.
That's what
let us strengthen regional
earlier, I think he sincerely believed that will work out. Yeah. But as he got older,
yes,
he saw that this was not going to work out.
It didn't work.
Okay.
And the point about...
And then you say about the resolutions.
Yes.
How many resolutions have the OU issued, the African Union?
Yes. That was my next question, actually. Yeah? Have these been implemented? When they keep on coming with resolutions.
No, the point I wanted to go back to is the issue of political will.
Yes.
I think, apart from the definition he advanced, political will, in my view, is a function of interests. In other words, if you don't have a clear interest, there is no political will that's going to be... You can't have any commitment.
You can't have commitment, yeah.
Now, what we should then look for is what is that kind of organizing interests that should focus the minds of Africans. Nyerere's argument was basically that this is an existential threat that Africa faces, because he went to the point of saying, you will not be there, you people, if you don't get your act together. I am not quite sure that the leadership, political leadership today, has woken up to that. They may pretend that they're doing integration, but not in the sense of securing Africa's security, because that's what Nyerere was talking about. Africa's political security, Africa's economic and social security. We have not quite transcended the limits and boundaries of just economic integration, etc. The issue of security of Africa, not even to talk about Africa's influence.
So what is required to be able to achieve that, Professor, very quickly?
To what extent are we aware of that? Because so far, let me say this, the AU and all these other organizations, because of this sovereignty illusion,
yes.
I call it an illusion because there is it's empty sovereignty. You know, if you are not able to depend on yourself, you can't be sovereign.
So that is what I call the positive legacy of colonialism.
Okay.
So the point I'm saying is that the minute we realize that we are living an illusion of territorial integrity, and nobody is in territorial. Look at the border problems that are going on across. Look at what's going on in Southern Sudan. Look at what's going on in Somalia.
Malawi and Tanzania,
in Congo, Malawi and Tanzania, etc. All these are necessary issues looking for necessary solutions, but we are not rising to that level.
Okay.
Being able to understand.
Please, you've been quiet for a while.
Yeah.
For a few more minutes.
But I think the key here is maybe summarized in the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. This Africa Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Because there is the entry point for getting your political will. The political class, the political class which now attends conferences on behalf of Africans, do they arise from the will of the people? I mean, do the elections in Africa produce people of the kind that you had in Nkrumah? You know, do they represent, you know, this groundswell of, you know, what, you know, Professor Barego was telling me, I'm speaking more of advocacy. But it is advocacy based on living with people, small producers.
With an NGO perspective.
No. Small producers. small miners.
Not the government
okay?
perspective.
Small scale miners, small scale distributors, ordinary people on the street. You know, these are the ones who in the past influenced the nationalist movement and the Pan-African movement. Now the leadership has cut itself from this current. You know, and that's why your 2007 the People's Charter was trying to say, and by the way, Tanzania has not even signed this this charter this charter of democracy, elections, and governance. Tanzania has not even signed. Not even ratified. You know,
we don't believe in that.
So the outcome is that, you know, leaders who are not elected. Honestly, okay? Leaders who do not come from the people cannot carry this dream, okay? Because without that dream being realized of a continental federal government which arises from genuine elections, which express the will of the ordinary, you know, small scale producers and so on. Then you can't. These people don't. You know, they live here, but they are like Jammeh in Gambia. they can rush off. You know, with all the dollars. You know, and $50,000. Most. You know, I mean, they live here, but they don't belong here.
Okay,
you know?
Roitama.
Without dealing with the issue of democracy, you can't produce the kind of leaders who can carry on the dream.
Okay, thank you, Roitama. But let me ask you a very simple question. In the first place, are the people referring to the ordinary Tanzanians or the ordinary African miners, the small scale, are they themselves aware of what AU or previously OAU stands for? Do you know if they exist? Do they even bother knowing about it? Do you think so?
I think the question of consciousness is a process. But the key is your life. If your life is one of moving from one place to another, if your life is one, if you are living by the border, you have to go, you know, I mean, I've seen at Rusumo, people from Rwanda coming to buy rice from Kahama at, you know, the other side of Tanzanian border. If you are living on the Ugandan border, it is the same. If you are living on the Zambia border, it is the same. Ordinary people, with their feet, they are living this dream. It's the leadership, because they are concerned about these borders, which give them,
all right,
you know,
okay,
21 gun salutes, red carpet. That's what they live. You know?
All right, okay.
Very quickly. Very live example. In 2007, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda embarked upon an exercise of looking for people's views on the fast tracking of political federation.
2005.
In 2005.
Yeah.
Our committee was chaired by Professor Wangwe.
Well, Professor Wangwe.
Yes.
And do you know what happened? On the question of, do people want political integration? Almost 90% of the people, almost 90, you know, and even Tanzania had the highest, 92 people who want political integration.
Yes.
The next question was, do they want fast tracking of this process? Kenya and Uganda were still above 60% they are accepting fast tracking.
Yes.
Tanzania, on the contrary, which liked integration most, also wanted the slowest process.
25%.
25%. Now, that's still not explained. How can you?
Rwanda had the highest.
Rwanda had the highest. So what I'm saying, I'm using this to show that the people are probably ahead of us. They're ahead of the government.
The people, I think I agree with you. The people
the
know.
Government is dragging
they may
them
not
back.
know the headquarters of OAU.
They don't know.
But if you ask them, do you want to live peacefully with Kenya? Do you want to trade with Kenya? Do you have to do this?
Yes, but if you ask the Maasai in Arusha, Kajiado, do you want the Maasai in Kenya to just come and live here freely or that? Because that committee found out that the Maasai says, no, we want to do trade here and there, but we don't want them to.
You mean the Wangwe Committee?
Yes.
But the other thing,
Wangwe has a problem because of this 92% versus 24%. How can that be?
But the other problem is that is how you phrase your question to
Yeah.
ask someone. You have already predetermined the answer is going to give.
All right.
So some of
Yeah,
these
let-
questions-
Please,
let
please
me
come
also
in
speak.
very quickly. Time. We have just about 15 minutes, and we have to finish.
Dragging this.
Okay.
Yes. I'm still, I think, advocating for making use of the institutional arrangements that are on the ground to try to take the process of integration forward. And I am for strengthening the African Union Commission to give it more powers and mandate to coordinate the activities of member states on these questions of integration, because there is a lot in common.
That's a good wish. But do you really agree? Think that the heads of state of this government will accept it?
Let
Wait a
me
minute.
finish
Let
my
him
point.
finish his
Let
train
me
of
finish
thought.
There's a
my
question
point.
about
Because
agenda
you know,
2063.
you have-
You come in. Let
you
Ambassador
have to
finish.
start somewhere. And
Yes.
I'm saying that if
Let's start
we
somewhere.
proceed on this basis, we have the AU, which is not the AU Commission, which is weak, and it doesn't really have powers over the
I'm sorry to be personal, Ambassador.
Yes.
You served as Tanzania permanent representative to the OAU.
Yes.
And probably part of the AU, and you were involved in the transition from OAU to AU. Yes. I want to be a bit personal.
Yes.
You can respond, you can decline. Personally,
Yes.
with that experience in the OAU and AU, do you believe we really need an African continental single government, foreign affairs and currency?
The governments will be afraid to do that if you made that proposal now. But I know they will be acceptable to the vision of it. They will say, yes, we want unity. We don't want it today. But yes, we want an institution which can coordinate our positions on matters of common interest to the continent and common interest to other countries.
Yes.
And this is, I think, this is an area where you can continue dealing with these governments and taking forward this argument on integration.
Before I come to you, Professor Baregu, let me have another follow-up question.
Yes.
You know, you're talking about strengthening the infrastructure, like the commissions.
Yes.
We now
And
have
the institution.
We have the AU Commission in Addis Ababa. Last year, the heads of state and government elected or nominated, whichever word is appropriate, the chairman of the commission, a Chadian, to replace Zuma, whose term was finished, and a few other commissioners. Have you heard anything since the summit in Kigali last year? I mean, they've been, yes, appointed, they've replaced it, but doesn't it seem to be a bit dormant? Like all the other things, like NEPAD, you don't know much about it, yes?
The new leaders are still learning the rules of the
I
game.
understand.
I think,
Okay,
I think
Professor.
what we have here,
Very diplomatic.
As diplomat he is.
let me bring in this issue of Agenda 2063.
2063,
That is the AU's vision of where we're going. And I read it carefully, and I was very disappointed because, you know, I think with all due respect to the ambassador student, no, I'm saying this purely for comradely.
Yes.
We're very close friends.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that you know, the conception. What is the nature of this problem? I think the problem is political. They think the problem is bureaucratic, or rather, that they bureaucratize what is essentially a political problem. Political problems mean that you have to look squarely at what is it that drives you, what is your future, what is that going to determine where you are. That's the vision. And what I'm saying is that this issue of creating institutions, rules, whatever, and making decisions and resolutions which are never implemented. I mean, you are just lost in a cul-de-sac. You don't come out at all because you are locked in the same thing. It revolves around the institutions, and they become fulfilling. In other words, it's self-serving. I mean, it's the AU. It's what's the
African Union?
The African Union, the Secretariat, the
Commission.
The Commission. Yeah. The Commission. And if you look at the health of the Commission and you say, we are there, we have survived. I'm saying that is the challenge, in my view, is greater than maintaining.
Thank you, Professor
institutions
Baregu. I'm sorry. As a moderator, I have to weigh the time as well.
Them on life support.
Professor Baregu.
Yes, I am sorry. Mr. Chairman.
I am the moderator, not chairman.
I know you are.
Thank you.
I accept.
Thank you very much. Now, I wanted to cite something which I read again. I think I told you, Professor Baregu. A report of the African Development Bank, which is on African Economic Outlook 2017, and I'll read it as I took it. It's on a composite measure of a nation condition, says, while large portion of the continent's 1.2 billion people live in poverty, many of Africa's 54 nations have made significant progress in health, education, and standard of living. At least a third of African countries have now achieved the medium to high levels of human development. It says, while there are bright spots in Africa move towards better economic, income, education, and health, serious challenges remain in the fight against poverty. Africa remains the second most dynamic region in the world behind developing countries in Asia. Do you share that view?
In the minerals sector, I suspect it will
Extractive,
be very dynamic.
extractive industries.
In the extractive industry.
Yes, Africa is producing more now.
Where we are losing.
But also, I think you may have economic growth within a country, yet inequality widens and that persists.
Gender
So
imbalance and all this.
Yeah,
All right. Fine. I mean, my understanding is that you do share with that, but with the further explanation.
To give you another area where Africa is dynamic.
Okay.
The
Very
youth
quickly.
and the social media.
Yes.
In Gambia, okay, ECOWAS, because he has got Nigeria and Ghana, which have now at least come upstream, in liberal democracy.
Yes.
They use the structures which are not there, but because there was a push from the ground,
Yes.
young people were able to say no.
All right. The theme of
So the
Africa
young
Day.
people,
Yes.
a lot of young people using social media,
Yes.
are pushing the agenda now.
Okay.
And they are the ones who are going
Okay,
to
Dr.
determine
Waitama.
that we are going to move away from just staying another 54 years, just merely in transition.
All right. I want also to cite now something which is relevant for what we're saying. The theme of Africa Day 2017 is harnessing the demographic dividend through investing in the youth. So more or less is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wind the discussion now. Time is about, I have to conclude. At 54, very quickly, I'll start with you and go around. At 54, what challenges has the EU faced and what are its future challenges beyond 54? Very quickly, one or two, we have to conclude now.
The leaders have taken themselves away from the population, but the population, through the reality of their living, okay, are pushing forward, and without investment from the state in education, the youth are taking every opportunity they have to educate themselves on the dream of Pan-Africanism.
What's the challenge here?
The challenge is that the leadership is likely to be left behind.
All right. Professor Mohabi, very quickly, what's the challenge?
For
the OU, what challenges has at 54 has UA faced, and what
biggest
future
challenge is
challenges?
whether the African Union will survive another 54 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Baregu?
Well, the biggest challenge is that Africa really needs to rethink about its ultimate goal. Where do we want to go? Because to continue saying that we are building unity without actually redefining what it is we want to do is a waste of time.
Professor?
Mine is on strengthening the coordination role of the African Union Commission.
All right. coordination, African bureaucracy, sorry to use that word, challenges, and the education. The leadership will be left behind. Doubts
we
whether
drag the youth backwards.
Yes.
But the youth, I'm quite confident.
Okay, whether Professor Muhabe, whether it will survive another 54 years. My panelists, thank you very much. I'm sure what you have raised up now, if we are able to live another 54 years, when the AUs will celebrate, I don't know, it will be 108 in the next 54 years. It will be 108. We'll see what happens if you could survive. Okay? Or you'll be resurrected to come and see from your graves to see what the AOU has done and what it is today. Thank you very much, my panelists. Viewers, you heard a very interesting discussion here. It was very hot at times, but I thought I may not be able to moderate the discussion because when you have my four friends here, I know them. They're very powerful and they have very, very interesting issues to talk about. So, but thank God I manage. The African Union is an organization that succeeded the Organization of African Union, the other African Union, some 24 years this year, and its member states marked Africa Day on the 25th of May to celebrate its maturity and certainly to take stock of what it has achieved in 54 years. In 1999, of course, the heads of state and governments of the OAU issued a declaration when they met, which in Sirte, Libya, referred to as the Sirte Declaration, calling for the establishment of an African Union, which will accelerate the process of continental integration. And you have heard here, it's still a pipe dream, not full integration. Will play its right role in global economy, I suppose it has with its globalization, whilst also addressing the multifaceted social, economic, and political problems. We still see these problems today. Have these desires, goals, objectives, establishing the African Union being achieved in 54 years? Well, my panelists were able to answer this question in their various understanding. My panelists, as I said, have attempted to answer this and many other related questions. It has also has a very interesting vision. Let us hope the AU will still remain useful if it survives another 54 years, according to Professor Muhabe. It will be purposeful and it will be a representative of one common African agenda and aspiration to the development of the continent if we take into account the youth demands and how they develop now. That's all we have for you today. Until next Sunday at 21 hours and on Thursday at 15 hours for the repeat program. On behalf of my panel, very able panel, Dr. Lwaitama.
Thank you.
Professor Muhabe Nyurapu.
Thank you.
Professor Mwasiga Baregu.
Thank you very much.
Ambassador Dr.
Mangachi.
Msuya Mangachi.
Thank you very
and
much.
my TBC Television Center crew. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye. We hope, viewers, next week we'll try to discuss the heads of state and government of the East African Community Summit recently and see whether some of their decisions and declarations are anything that we can live on and see the East African community strengthened. Thank you and bye-bye.